All right, welcome back. My name is Michael Rasmussen. This is my YouTube series called Last Week, This Week in RIA Compliance, where we discuss legal and compliance issues related to investment advisors. Today, we're going to talk about how UK financial professionals can become registered as investment advisors in the United States. To jump right in, the first thing we need to cover is, are you even an investment advisor? We'll get into much more detail about the definition of what an investment advisor is in a later conversation, in a later post. Assuming you meet the definition of an investment advisor, which is generally somebody who provides investment advice about securities, about whether or not it's advisable to buy or sell different types of securities for compensation, is generally considered an investment advisor in the United States. So assuming that you're a UK financial professional and you've met that definition, we're going to walk through the steps you need to take to become registered. I want to begin with this idea that you likely aren't familiar with in the United Kingdom of the federalism. That's the idea that we have two major forms of government here in the United States, and that's at the federal level, and then we have our state level regulation. So most of you have probably heard of the Securities and Exchange Commission. That is the federal level entity that oversees investment advisors in the United States. However, there are a lot of investment advisors out there that are actually regulated at the state level. So as a UK-based financial professional, if you were going to register in the United States, you would register with the Securities and Exchange Commission. This is because you don't necessarily have a principal or office location in a particular state, and therefore there's this idea of jurisdiction, and state by states generally don't have that kind of jurisdiction over you. But you would have that registration ability at the federal or SEC level. Under the Investment Advisors Act of 1940, which outlines how investment advisor firms are defined and then how they are registered, there's this idea, again, of registering either with the state or registering with the SEC. You, as a foreign advisor, would likely be able to or would register with the Securities and Exchange Commission. Assuming that you've met the definition of an investment advisor and you want to go ahead and register, there's these two ideas of prohibition and of exemption. So you are generally prohibited from registering with the SEC if you're too small or if you don't offer the right types of services, for example. Then you're prohibited from registering with the SEC. Again, we get over that prohibition as a foreign advisor because you don't have a principal place of business at a state level. So you're automatically not prohibited from registering with the SEC. Some investment advisors are. Smaller investment advisors located in a specific state with a small client base generally are prohibited actually from registering with the SEC. The second bullet point is that some firms, regardless or even though they are not prohibited from registration, are exempt from registration. This means that they meet the definition of an investment advisor. They are not prohibited from registering with the SEC, but they meet a certain exemption and are not required to register with the SEC. I know this gets a little confusing and a little semantic, but foreign advisors who have a very small client base here in the United States are actually exempt from registration with the SEC. If you have no principal place of business and you have 15 or fewer clients less, and you have a fairly low assets under management number, you are likely able to conduct a small amount of business in the United States without registering with the SEC, despite meeting the definition of an investment advisor. We're going to get into some of the reasons here why you would elect, though, to become registered with the SEC. And the primary one is that institutional clients really like the idea of regulatory oversight. They want to know that you as an investment advisor have somebody looking over your shoulder. Generally speaking, if you're a financial professional in the United Kingdom, you already have the Financial Conduct Authority and some other regulators looking at your business. But if you're a client that's based in the United States, assuming that that's why you're looking to do business in the United States is to go after those US-based clients, they are generally much more comfortable with the idea of the SEC overseeing your business and checking in once in a while to make sure that you're staying in compliance with the Investment Advisors Act of 1940 and the related rules. That's the key reason why, even if you are exempt from that registration requirement, a lot of our clients still come to us and say, hey, I don't need to be registered in the United States. And the answer to that is maybe yes, maybe no. But if you're not required, you may want to consider just doing it because, again, having that regulatory oversight is important to clients, especially those institutional clients. Lots of clients like to have the information that's required to be disclosed as part of being registered with the SEC. We'll talk about all those disclosure requirements in a later discussion, but generally speaking, investment advisors who do business in the United States have to produce a lot of disclosures regarding that business to clients and to regulators. So those are the reasons why, even if you are exempt again, you may want to be registered. So what does that registration process really look like? It changes a lot by firm, depending on the shape and size of what kind of business you're doing. But we really break it down into 5 core steps. We talked about this in a previous YouTube post, but we're going to give you the highlights here again. So step number 1 is sit down and really build out a business plan. Who are your clients? What are the services you're going to provide to them? How are you going to market to them? What do you think your compensation structure should look like? What are the third-party providers you're going to rely on? What does your employee and office location structure kind of look like? And so on and so forth. It is absolutely critical that you understand really what you're trying to accomplish with your investment advisor firm. We work with a lot of clients where these first conversations are really quite difficult and challenging because, yes, they want to be an investment advisor, and yes, they have a general idea of what that means, but they haven't sat down and thought about the consequences of picking a particular path. The second thing we spend time on during the registration process is entity formation and corporate governance matters. In the United States, like in the UK, we have what are called limited liability companies, and that's generally the preferred vehicle to register an investment advisor with in the United States. In the United Kingdom, you have what are called limited companies. Very similar concept. We try to lower the liability exposure that principals of those entities have by putting them inside these legal vehicles to make sure that it's the entity and not the individual that's on the line if things went poorly with clients, for example. Corporate governance matters are extremely important to get right early on in the process, especially where there's multiple partners involved. When we're dealing with new investment advisor firms or firms looking to register as investment advisors in the United States, we spend a lot of time working through their operating agreement, their corporate governance documents, those documents that tell how those partners are going to be interacting with each other, who can join the firm, how do you leave the firm, the responsibilities of each party of different partners, and so on and so forth. That document is absolutely essential. And again, it goes back to really having a solid business plan. And a lot of the conversations that you have around that corporate governance is centered on the direction the firm is going. And that's detailed in your business plan. The third thing we do during the registration process is create your disclosure documents and your client agreements. As I mentioned earlier, the registration process triggers a number of disclosure requirements for investment advisors in the United States. So if you do get registered in the United States as a UK financial professional, you'll be required to make a lot of disclosures. Again, about things like what services do you provide? How are you compensated for those services? This all revolves around the idea of a fiduciary obligation that you owe to your client, and that's a duty of care and the duty of loyalty. And under the duty of loyalty, you have an obligation to disclose any material conflicts of interest. And these are the disclosure documents that make sure that you meet that requirement. So there's these very important disclosure documents. They're called the ADV disclosure brochure. And we'll get into that, I'm sure, during a later discussion. The other thing that we spend a lot of time creating are these client agreements. This is obviously the agreement between you and your end client. And that document, again, will kind of encapsulate all those services and the compensation and how your relationship with them will work out. The Investment Advisors Act of 1940 has certain rules that govern what can and cannot be in those contracts. But like I mentioned before, we have 2 layers of government here in the United States that are very broadly speaking. And one of those layers, again, is state regulation. And where contracts are created, there's generally that state rules regarding contract formation and execution are enforced. So if your client agreements are with clients based in the great state of Florida, where I am, then that state, the state of Florida's rules regarding contracts would be in charge of how those contracts are interpreted and actually put into force. So the fourth step is the actual registration application. This is where we work with our clients to submit an application with the SEC. We communicate with them. This is what we're trying to accomplish. What do you need from us? And we really work with those regulators on a very transparent basis to make sure that we'll get that process done as quickly and smoothly as possible. The last piece of this is the compliance program, and this is where you build out your regulatory compliance manual, your cybersecurity policy, your business continuity plan, your privacy notice, all of these fun things that come along with having a robust compliance program that's part of that registration process. Once you've gone through all of those steps and the SEC has blessed your application, you are ready to do business as an investment advisor in the United States. As a legal professional in both the state of Florida here and as a licensed solicitor in the United Kingdom, we're in a very unique position to be able to help our clients on both sides of the Atlantic. And we'd really like to hear from you if there's anything we can help you with. But I did want to say thank you for watching. If you did like this video, please hit the subscribe button, and we really do hope to see you in the next one.